So my 10-week 10K training block is now complete. One 5K PB, one course 10K PB, and one 32-minute 10K attempt that didn't quite go to plan. Today I'm going to be sitting down, giving you a couple of brief thoughts on that, and then giving you guys the lowdown as to what's coming up next on the channel. So welcome back to another video. Excited to sit down with you guys today, give you a couple of thoughts on that 10K training block, but then sit down and dive in to what is coming up next, the next 12-week training block, which is going to be starting next week. Very excited for it. I'm going to explain the rationale behind it, the races that I'm doing, maybe some potential tune-up races that I might see some of you guys at, and then what the bigger long-term picture looks like moving in to next spring. So if you're excited for today's video, guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, and of course, please do consider subscribing to the channel for weekly running content. Let's dive in to a quick 10K training block recap. So firstly, a massive thanks to all of you who commented on the goal race video, whether it was on the race, whether it was on Strava, Instagram, TikTok, wherever it might have been posted. I appreciate all of your support. Some very wise words coming out of you guys, some stuff that I would say to other people, because I'm sure a lot of you clearly saw my frustration that things didn't quite go to plan, and having time to reflect and sit down and process everything. I understand not every race can be a PB. I think for me, it was just a case of sitting back and going, why was I well over a minute away from what I was trying to achieve? And actually that was one of the slowest 10Ks I've run over the last year and a half, I think it was. I've run a fair few 33-minute 10Ks now, and they've all been in decent conditions and some in bad conditions. So it was left a little bit puzzling for me, but I guess it's one of those ones that I'm not going to dwell on too much. We take it, we bank it, we got a podium, very, very happy with that, and we move on to the next. So in terms of the training block itself, I managed to complete 10 weeks training and I came out the other side in one piece, which I am delighted about, because the last two 10K training blocks where I've focused more on intensity, dropped the volume, increased the intensity, I've ended up getting injured. Both times it's been my right calf, and I'm delighted to have got through this training block and banked another 10-week block. And if I take a helicopter view of the year so far, obviously I've achieved a lot of PBs in a lot of distances, but I've managed to get through one really good marathon training block, and then I've bounced off the back of that with a really smart recovery, managed to be able to get into this training block smoothly and banked another solid 10 weeks of training. So as far as I'm concerned, so far in 2023, it's been really successful with training, which is why I'm excited to talk about what's coming up next after this. So if I look at it from that perspective, I've got to think to myself, I'm delighted. Third time lucky, injury-free, mostly, and feeling really good. Only a couple of workouts didn't quite go to plan. Happy that I moved some bits and pieces around during that training block due to fatigue or taking warning signs, whatever it might be. I was a lot more flexible this block. I did shift things around a little bit, dropped a couple of double days where I felt I was a bit too fatigued, maybe on bordering injury risk. And just doing little bits and pieces that allow me to get to the end in one piece. Because as I keep saying on a lot of training videos, getting a solid 8 out of 10 training week in, week after week after week, is far more important than getting a couple of 10 out of 10s, but then absolutely getting injured, or putting in a few 4 out of 10s, 5 out of 10s because of injury or because of fatigue, whatever it is. So just keeping that constant effort level all the way through really made the world of difference to me. And of course, the goal outcome wasn't what I wanted it to be, but as I just said, we move on, we take it forward, and I feel in really good shape. I think the best thing for me now is I've come off the back of it feeling in really good shape and feeling like I'm ready to attack some more races. The only thing I really have to address now is this sciatic issue, which I've kind of mentioned very briefly in a couple of training videos, but I haven't spoken on a great deal. And it's actually something that I picked up when I got injured back in December last year. I came back from an issue where I almost couldn't lift up my right leg. I was dragging it. My hip and everything had locked up. It was very peculiar feeling. And as I rehabbed it and got better, saw physios and started training again, it pretty much got back to normal. But I only ever felt since that point, since January, that I've been able to really drive my leg sort of 95%. There's always been that little bit less lift I've been able to get in the leg compared to the left one. And it's just this thing that's been hanging around from me since back in January, since I've rehabbed from this injury. And it's something that I've noticed during the marathon training block, and this 10K training block has fluctuated, been really good, or it's flared up. And it often depends on what type of strength training I'm doing to help it. If I'm doing strength work in general, I tend to get a good result and it feels really good. If I do a bit more targeted stuff in and around the hips, then I can sometimes feel like it sets me back 2 steps and I can really suffer. It can ache and it can hurt, and on the run I find that I'm dragging my leg again. And it's something that I've really got to get to the bottom of. So this week in particular right now, I'm making sure I do 3 big heavy strength sessions, writing down everything that I do, working out what does well for me, like what I don't react to, and then work out what I do react to. So everything I did on Sunday evening, which was a heavy session, was great. My leg has felt really good on Monday and Tuesday. When I do another session on Wednesday, I'll do different exercises, see how it reacts off that, and then I'll do another one next Sunday, and then I can start putting my strength and conditioning together to accommodate that, and basically choose the stuff that's making it feel better rather than aggravating the issue. So that's the only thing that I really want to, leaning into the second half of this year, get on top of. Otherwise, I'm ready to get into this next training block. So that allows me to move nicely into what is coming up next. What is the next training block? It's 12 weeks. What am I going to be training for? And I'm actually going to be training now for a half marathon. I'm going to be doing a half marathon training block as opposed to another marathon block. So let me explain the reasoning behind this so that you understand, because I have talked quite a bit that I would love to have done 2 marathons this year rather than just the one that I am going to be doing, as to why I've changed my mind and what this is going to mean for the rest of the year. So for me, my half marathon distance is actually my favourite distance to run completely. Like 10K, I feel like it's my strongest event. Half marathon is my favourite to run, but it's actually one of my weakest PBs and one of my weakest areas, and I fully appreciate and understand that I need to really work on that area if I want to take another good chunk out of my marathon time leading into spring next year. So what that means for me is that I'm going to be working on that middle ground between 10K and marathon, because over the last, I think, year or maybe even a couple of years, I've basically flitted from marathon block to 10K block to marathon to 10K, and I've neglected the half marathon distance, and I feel like that there's this big void in the middle of my training that I feel like I need to spend and dedicate a little bit of time to. Now I've completed a good speed block, start to work on that middle ground between 10K and half marathon, so that at the moment my half marathon PB stands at 75 minutes and 14 seconds, and for me as a 2:40 marathon runner, I want to get that down into sort of like the 74s, 73s ideally. That's where I'd love it to be, but I mean a 74 would be fantastic, just so that I know that going into my next marathon block I've kind of worked on that speed endurance extension from 10K, so I can start to extend that speed that I've worked out from 10K over the half marathon distance. And then if I can get myself into really good half marathon shape at the end of October, then I've got a really nice time from November to take a little bit of downtime and then do a really big solid build into a spring marathon next year. I personally want to give Will the opportunity, my coach, the chance to have a proper big marathon training block with me. It's important that in the last training block we only had like 12 or 13 weeks, and I feel like he often talks to me about having a really good sort of 16, 18, 20 week block where the first phase is a lot of base building stuff and then we work into it. And I feel like to get the best out of myself, I want to give him that opportunity. He's done so much for me this year in terms of PBs and things. I've fully put my trust into him, and I feel like if I can get a nice half marathon block done, then I can hopefully give him the opportunity to train me and get me into really good shape for a spring marathon next year. And there's a couple of half marathon races that I'm looking at. I am looking at the end week of October, because that will be 12 weeks from when I start my training next week. I'm going to be honest with you, I am looking at trying to organise Malaga half marathon. I'd love to go abroad. It works because it's in the half term. I could take the family on a holiday. I appreciate it's going to be warm there, so I might not get the goal time I want. I'm fully aware of that, and I would indeed have a backup half marathon in November, which I've got my eye on, potentially Gosport, which is 3 weeks after that, and I might look at some other ones that might work a little bit better, maybe a little bit closer to me. Half marathons are a bit limited in and around that time of year in the UK, but there's a couple of options there that I'm looking at. But I'd love to do Malaga if I can. If I can't and it doesn't work and costs, permitting, it just doesn't work because it's going to be an expensive job to fly the family out and have a holiday afterwards, then I would probably look at something like Stroud Half Marathon from a UK perspective, or I might pick something like Manchester, which is on the 15th or 16th, which might only give me 10 weeks, but then it might be a really good big pack race, which is what I want. I want to be in a group of people, I want to be able to run around my pace. I don't want a half marathon that's quite low key. And I know with Stroud, although it's on the lower end, I know there's a lot of fast runners that go to that race. So I'm kind of looking at races that are going to suit what I'm after, which is the time I'm trying to go for, 73 or 74 minutes. So yeah, those are the two races that I'm looking at in terms of a half marathon goal race. And then in between that, I'm going to keep racing relatively sparse. I'm very aware right now that I've done a good solid 10-week of training with 4 races in it, and I am where I am. Fitness is where it's at, and if I rock up to more races now, I'm really not going to be too surprised and have any more surprises. Oh my gosh, I've run a massive PB, because fitness is where it is. I now need to get my head down and train, and I need to train hard over the next 12 weeks to kind of take that next step, and that's what I want to do. So I'm probably going to drop in a race in August. I'm definitely going to drop a race in September, and that might be it. I want to get my head down, I want to train hard, and I want to really nail this half marathon time. And then what I've also been doing behind the scenes is looking at races in the November and December time, so that if I don't hit any of my goals, as I said, looking at potential 10Ks. Obviously there's Telford, there's Wilmslow in November, there's Eynsham 10K, which I'd love to do as well. I might end up booking onto that one. There's a few 10Ks that I want to really go for that 32, so I'm going to pick the one that works best for me. And again, half marathon, if I don't quite achieve it, hopefully wait for the temperatures to be a little bit cooler in November and December and give it a go. So I've got some backups there, but that's going to be the plan for the next block, and I'm really buzzing to take you guys along with me, because I will be doing another training series just like this 10K training block you've seen. So there we go, in a nutshell. 10K recap, half marathon training block, some goal races out there, some backup races. That's the plan. That's what's coming up next. And once again, just finally, a massive thanks to you guys for supporting me over the last training block. I'm excited to take you guys along the journey with me once again for this next training block. That's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving it a like, share it with your friends, and of course, do consider subscribing to the channel for weekly running content. I'll see you in the next one. Until then.